And we are live on the 6th, actually the 7th, ExitStrategy.World webcast with our CEO, the Guerrilla Economist, aka VJ Varghese. He joins us from the ESW studios here in the upper Midwestern United States. And we're very happy to have V on. It's been a few weeks where we've been getting the stars aligned and the schedules lined up. He's a very busy man, and we're very happy to have him on the show today.
Charles, it's a pleasure to be on, and again, lucky number 7, right? I mean, the 7th episode of ESW podcast, and dude, I'm glad to be on. It's about time that you and I got together. We've both been busy building this thing from a concept. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, this was something that we were toying about for quite some time, and then the right pieces have come together to launch ESW, and ESW, ExitStrategy.World, is so bloody unique. It's more unique than any other offshoring services out there because unlike other players who are just looking at, offshore this, offshore that, we have the ability to trends forecast. We have the ability to have a geostrategic, geoeconomic outlook that is completely lacking in the offshoring industry. And as things get more tenuous here at home in the United States and much of the Western world, a lot of Westerners who are sick of what's happening within their own respective countries are looking to get the heck out. They're starting to understand that historically we've seen this all over the place, Charles. I mean, James, these respective Western nations collapse, they become the very competitors to their own citizenry. And what I mean by that is this, the average citizen is right now, he's thinking, I got to compete against so-and-so in order to get my preps in order to get my supplies in order to make sure I got cash in the accounts and this, that, and the other. But the government becomes the kleptocratic government that it is, and it begins to pinch and squeeze and steal from its own citizenry. And that's something a lot of people are starting to wake up to, but they don't know where to go. They don't know where to start, but we're here to point them in the right direction, James.
Yes, that's spot on, that the government is becoming the competitor to the individual, to the corporation, to the family office.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of people who think, well, I've got my family office and I've got a Nevada or a Wyoming trust, I'm safe. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. And everything's not going to be okay. Because if you're not going offshore and you have assets, then you're missing out on a major avenue of wealth protection and wealth preservation.
Yep, exactly correct. And people don't understand. It's like, people are like, well, I have like you said, I have a U.S. domicile trust. I'm going to be all right. Well, if the trustee all of a sudden gets a court order to start liquidating or start, handing over the assets at the threat of arrest, there goes that,
Exactly. And a lot of people, there's also on the other opposite extreme, the lone wolf, everybody's going to turn into Rambo idea that the fantasy a lot of people are clinging to that, as you like to say, I've got my coins from Bob's Cash and Carry. I've got my tins of cat food. I've got my gun, my AR-15 and my Pappy's hunting rifle. I'm going to be country boy can survive. Well, yeah, that worked out well enough for Randy Weaver, didn't it? And Ruby Ridge.
Yeah, exactly.
I was having this conversation with Michael Yon, who was thus far has been our highest rated guest on the 6th webcast. It's hard to believe we're already at the 7th. I mean, we just started doing these April 15th, tax day, appropriately enough. We had our first guest on, Isaac Simpson, who runs an agency out in Los Angeles, a very based agency, I should say. And we were talking about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, which seems about as far away from offshoring as you can get. But in fact, it has more to do with offshoring than you might think, because he was talking about, launching an agency in LA of all places that actually serves people who are just based businessmen, some people on the right, some people who are just, libertarians and free thinkers. But it was a very interesting interview because, it kind of set the tone for a lot of the directions we're going in terms of guests. And since then, what we've been doing primarily is interviewing guests from Latin America. We've had 2 guests from Venezuela, which is not a coincidence because Venezuela is a country that's gone through hyperinflation. It's gone through a partial failure of statehood, a partial collapse of society. And Venezuela is currently in the process, and this was the topic of discussion with Michael Yon, of sending their criminals up here, of emptying out their prisons, their jails, of some of their most vilest, sex and rapist offenders. And, some of them, as Donald Trump says, I assume are good people, but they're not sending their best. It's like Mariel Boatlift 2.0. And how many future Tony Montanas do we already have in our borders? And that was the topic of discussion with Michael Yon last week. We've had 3,500 views, over 3,500 views of that show on Rumble, and several hundred views on X. I mean, I've reposted it several times on X, but just adding all those views up, plus on YouTube. And then I haven't even counted. I don't even tend to count how many views we get on Twitch. I'm sure it's significant.
Yeah, exactly.
And, the other point that Michael made, which I thought was very relevant very timely for this audience, was our audience in particular, is that everywhere you go, people think what they're facing is somewhat unique. But in fact, the pattern is similar. You have the same things going on: population demoralization, open borders, inflation of the currency, loss of faith in the future, deliberate efforts to get people not to procreate, and et cetera. A lot of these things, they're just happening all over the world, including in Japan, of all places. He even told me that there's been a lot of very suspicious fires of Japanese egg farms. You're like, oh, that's happening in Japan too? Not just here in the US? In Canada?
It's wild, man. It really is wild when you look at, food processing facilities, cattle ranches, chicken processing farms, pork farms, this, that, and the other, going up. Folks, we are in asymmetric siege warfare against a globalist elite who are just absolute psychopaths. And it's incredible to see that anybody that's aligned with the West is facing problems. It's the worst thing in the world. It's like, our enemy is not from without, folks. And we've said this so many times, James and I in the past as well. Our enemy is not from without; it's from within.
Exactly.
It's from within.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like your enemy is not your neighbor, and it's not some dictator sitting in Pyongyang, or
Correct.
The threat to your livelihood comes from this organized globalist evil and this spiritual, and it's spiritual, it's economic, it's physical, it's full spectrum warfare. And people just need to wake up and not be woke, but awake in both the spiritual and mental and financial sense. And so what we're doing is, a lot of alt media, they're doom and gloom. There's like, oh my God, World War III is going to start next week. Well, World War III already kind of started. You guys just didn't get the memo. I mean, it's going underway by proxy, except that the proxy gloves that both sides are punching each other with in the face or in the kidney shots are getting very, very thin indeed, V.
Sure.
And, we saw that this week. We've been running a series of our first ads for ESW services on Stanislav Krapivnik's YouTube channel, In the Eyes of Truth. And he had an interview with Scott Ritter. I believe he published it early this morning. And it's already getting people reaching out to us saying, oh, wow, I didn't know, what you guys were doing, or, I just heard a little bit about it. And now I see you're running ads already. And this is very cool. People wanting to work with us in different countries, people wanting to refer clients to us, sign up to become an affiliate. So a lot of things are happening. And most of what we've been doing, what you folks have been seeing is just the tip of the iceberg with these shows, right? Vast bulk of what we've been doing, 80 to 90% of it, is under the water. It's under the layers. And V can talk a little bit more about that because now that we've finally got the chance to sit down with our audience listening, it's very exciting. And he can tell you about some of the things we've been doing. For example, in Dubai with our sister company, Amparo.com.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the biggest thing is this. It's like, a lot of people, when they're thinking about offshoring, they're thinking about, okay, how am I going to move capital around? Right? How am I going to get from asset A to asset B and then diversify it into asset C, D, and F? How am I supposed to do that? And I'm telling you right now, out of all the firms that are out there, nobody is as proficient. Nobody has the cunning, the wherewithal, or the experience. What we've launched together with Royal Amparo, and I think our new updated website should be up momentarily. In fact, it's actually going to be up today. So let me see if that's up. Yeah, it's going to be up soon. So it's launching soon. So it should be up by either today, by end of day today, or by tomorrow. What we're doing with Royal Amparo, folks, is we actually teach you not only how to move these assets legally and above board, number one, but number two, to move them and to put them into jurisdictions under your control. In other words, we're not holding anything for you. We're not, telling you to go park it in XYZ institution, God knows where. No. We're teaching you how to take control of your assets. So number one, it's protected. Number two, you stay liquid. And number three, you have leverage.
Right.
Security, leverage, and privacy.
Security, leverage, and privacy. And V, you're using, let's be clear, you're using the same system that the ultra rich and the high net worth, the wealthy people have been using for the past 200 years, the LBMA good delivery system. Let's talk about that briefly.
Sure. Most Americans, 99% of Westerners in general, are completely ignorant of the gold market, right? When they think gold, they think of, Jimmy John's coin and carry. They're thinking about, your typical .com bullion dealers, or, hey, you have a 401k, you want to park it. And that's selling gold. People ask me, am I a gold bug? I can care less about gold, right? I really could. I mean, it's a great place to park as a hedge against inflation, especially as the world gets more chaotic. But what I love is I love liquidity. I love liquidity. If you are able, yes, if you are able to get liquidity, if you're able to stay liquid, and that liquidity that you control cannot be usurped by an outside entity, that liquidity you control cannot be lost by a third-party counter risk, and that liquidity you control is able to move in and out of assets anywhere in the world, then, my friend, you are a very, very, very powerful player on the chessboard, okay? Because that's the most important thing. Now, at the end of the day, I can care less about gold. At the end of the day, I can care less about silver. I can care less about Bitcoin or any other crypto. To me, these are all tools. These are all tools of the trade. These are all tools that are in our repertoire at Royal Amparo that allows us to do what? Move liquidity legally and above board anywhere in the world, in any jurisdiction, to have it liquidated into local currency in a moment's notice and put that into control of the client. Because let's be honest here, you can be a Bitcoin billionaire, right? You can be one of those crypto millionaires that you see, these young kids, right? Crypto millionaires, but they're at home with their mom because they have no way of what? Liquidating their assets, okay? Without getting either audited or SWAT teamed or God knows what, right? Because look, let's be honest, anybody in the United States who tried to do crypto, or who tried to dabble in crypto and try to, they got some profits and they're trying to, divest those profits and take the profits out of it from whatever exchange they were using, they felt the sting of their bank account being closed. You're not gonna, open a bank account in the United States and do a couple $100,000, maybe a few $1 million worth of crypto, and that bank account still be open. No, it's going to be closed. Okay, so what we do is, we show our clientele, and we do is be able to legally and above board in a very proprietary system, a very proprietary way, to allow our clients to become liquid globally. And that's the whole entire thing. That's the key here. Because if you're a Bitcoin millionaire or crypto millionaire and you can't utilize it, what good is it to you? Same thing goes for gold, right? Same thing goes for gold. I mean, you're sitting on a lot of gold. How much of it can you possibly hold, right? Or silver, same thing. How much of it can you Why would you want to hold a couple $1 million of gold in your house? You're crazy. What if your house burns down? What if you have a forced entry? Fine, you could be armed to the teeth and you could defend yourself. What if you have a gas leak and your house explodes? Okay, and then what?
God forbid. Right? Exactly. And not all insurance is going to cover it. And also, just from a practical standpoint, it's not easy to move gold across borders yourself. Certainly during the Holocaust, and, other historic situations, small amounts of gold secreted and small amounts of silver have saved lives. Certainly, no doubt about that. But the fact of the matter is that what has saved more lives almost than anything? a foreign passport or a foreign visa. That's what saved lives during the Holocaust. The ability to get out of Nazi Germany, the ability to get your family to a safer place. That's what saved people's lives. It wasn't just the fact that they had physical medals, right? Because the Nazis came and took the medals away. So, I mean,
Right.
and speaking of crypto, you've talked a little bit about this subject with, I believe, Gus Demos, our friends at Perpetua Playa down in El Salvador,
Right.
where, you had a conversation with Gus on the Cuss with Gus program, which a lot of Rogue News listeners love to listen to, about, Roger Ver. What happened to Roger Ver?
Oh, Roger's a perfect example. It's like, here's a gentleman who was very vocal about where he stood. He's very vocal about his government stance, very vocal about the monetary system, very vocal about banking and all that. And Roger's a good buddy of mine. I love Rog. He's a great guy. But he made the mistake of number one, is like, he thought that because, that he's no longer a U.S. citizen, right? He
renounced his citizenship.
Correct. Legally. And he spent millions of dollars doing so. And he did it in 2014. Right, he started the process. Took him about 2-3 years. He renounced his citizenship. He paid a couple $1 million. He paid all the taxes that need to be paid. This, that, and the other. In other words, Uncle Schmuck was good. And then all of a sudden, he wrote a book about what is hijacking Bitcoin, where it's a good book showing you exactly what I warned everybody about in 2016, including Roger himself. I was like, look, the crypto industry made a mistake by running to Wall Street with knee pads on, hoping for a handout, and now, the entire crypto industry has been usurped. In the United States, it has. I'm not going to say in every part of the world, but in the United States, it's been absolutely usurped, where it's a very business unfriendly country in the digital asset realm. If you have a digital assets business, why the hell would you want to do business in the United States? Where you got to be a crackhead to do something like that,
Yeah. So between the hostility, the SEC, and also the fact that they came after Roger retroactively. So in other words, they basically told him, you didn't value your Bitcoin at fair market value back in 2014 when Uncle Sam didn't give a shit, because they viewed Bitcoin at that time as sort of this novelty that was being traded online. But suddenly, because he renounced his citizenship and he's been outspoken about how the crypto industry is being manipulated in the United States, how people are being herded into the Bitcoin ETFs and, back into the Wall Street casino, the people who got orange pilled, some of them are mildly orange pilled, suddenly are being shuffled back to where it's not really their custody. It's not really their cryptocurrency. It's just, hey, here's an ETF. It's doing great. Look how many Wall Street players are investing in Bitcoin by, building up these ETFs. And, people didn't like that. And the Gensler SEC didn't like it. Obviously, the Gensler SEC has been completely out of control. Even some people in Congress make noises about it, but you notice they don't do a whole hell of a lot about it.
No, the GOP is nothing but a debate committee. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's token symbolic opposition. Folks, if you think Donald Trump's going to save you and your assets, you're kidding yourselves. Okay, he's not going to be able to do it. He's not going to be allowed to do it, even if he wanted to. Okay, and we're not even getting into that. But it's just, the point is, you got to have a plan B. You got to have a backup plan. You got to have an exit strategy, and that's why we named the company what it is. I sketched this idea out to V practically on a cocktail napkin, a series of texts, a series of cocktail napkin sketches last summer about this time, a few weeks after this time last year, and. It's been a phenomenal journey in terms of the partnerships we've been able to establish globally, in not only, pairing what V was already doing in Dubai with Royal Amparo, with his company registered in the DMCC, with his business partner who lives in Portugal, by the way, is an American who's already expatriated himself and his family from Brazil to Portugal. But also, the legal vehicles to make it legal. So you're not just moving assets across borders. You have a plan. You have a strategy. You know exactly what you're doing, what you're setting up, the structures you're putting in place in the most bulletproof jurisdictions on the planet, where, if they try to breach those, folks, the richest people in the world are going to have problems with the United States government in that case. It doesn't get safer and more legally ironclad than the case law in the Cook Islands, which is an overseas territory of New Zealand a lot of people haven't heard of. or the case law in the Bahamas is pretty good. I mean, in all these destinations, and Nevis for the trusts, it's very good. For Hong Kong, if you want a trust that is going to outlive you for your heirs, Hong Kong's an excellent place to set it up, because so we can offer these options, folks. I mean, this is the difference between us and, say, somebody who's only offering gold vaults or only offering some Bitcoin liquidity, but they're not offering liquidity with the other currencies, or likewise that somebody who's only offering the some offshoring services. Maybe they'll help you get a residency in one of the Caribbean islands or get a passport there. Yeah, there are many companies that do that, but they don't combine all these services under one roof.
No.
That's the difference between them and our team. And they're not in Eurasia. They're not active in Eurasia. A lot of the places, the countries in Eurasia that are developing, that are joining the BRICS, they want to live, they want to grow. Places like the Republic of Georgia, it's terra, it might as well be terra incognita to a lot of companies, right? They just want to stick with the tried and true white bread, what they've been doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And some companies like, I'm not going to name names, but the ones that are just basically CBI mills that are just cranking out thousands of passports a year, they're only interested in the ultra wealthy and working with governments. They're not interested in Jim Bob from Oklahoma, who might have a couple million in the bank, and some gas leases. They're not going to talk to that kind of client. They're not going to talk to other types of clients. So what I'm trying to say is that we can cover even with the small team as we have, we can cover a very broad gamut of clients. V, your thoughts on that?
No, that's exactly right, man. I mean, there's a type of coverage and service that we offer that is absolutely invaluable. A lot of the other places, like, okay, we set this up, but they're not really protecting you. Like, what is the point in the realm and the era of FATCA that we're living in, which is the Foreign Accounting and Taxation Act, right? Which if you're a U.S. citizen, you want to go ahead and you want to open up an account offshore. You got to basically give your right kidney a stool sample and a blood sample, and then they got to report on whatever income or whatever amount of money that you're putting into that account offshore. What is the point of doing that? And then risk confiscation. They're not protecting you really. They're just telling you to move somewhere. And that's what all these guys like nomad capitalists and all these other morons out there who are just telling you, hey, go move here, go do that. They're not really protecting you. They're not really offering and if they do protect you, it's very marginal. Number two, they don't understand banking. I come with a heavy banking background. I spent 10 years re-engineering the system that we're using for liquidity that Charles and I are talking about. I'm sorry, James and I are talking about. Okay, re-engineering the system to get this done. So no, nothing else even comes close, folks. Nothing else comes close. We're talking about real protection. We're talking about real liquidity. We're talking about real security and real leverage. That's something that nobody else can offer in the field. I guarantee you that, because most of the time when I talk to these guys who are quote unquote experts and I get them on the phone, I realize these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. You realize how ill-equipped they are. You realize how neophyte they are. Why? Because they don't have a finance background. They don't understand international banking. They don't understand compliance. They don't understand regulations. They don't understand a lot of things.
Correct. And they also, I would say, they are not prepared for an economically bifurcated world, or in reality, let's call it what it really is, a world where the insolvent seven, as V calls them, the G7 countries, have an ever-shrinking slice of the pie, share of the global economic pie, while the BRICS and the BRICS Plus countries are expanding. And what is the issue then? Well, the issue is, how do you get your assets from the shrinking part of the world economy to the growing part of the world economy, and do so safely and legally? How do you have the on-ramps and the off-ramps to go from Bitcoin to gold or vice versa, and make sure that you are moving your assets in a legal, documented way so that nobody, they can't legally come after you. I mean, they can try, but they're not going to have a lot of success, especially if you've got an overseas trustee in a place like the Cook Islands. Very good luck getting at your stuff.
Yeah, exactly correct. Exactly correct. And again, you combine that with the other systems that we have in place in terms of our liquidity system. our security and liquidity system that we've built and created, you have an unstoppable combination, and that's what ESW provides.
Exactly. It's about the synergies, and like I said, we don't try to serve everybody. We're certainly not everybody's cup of tea. We're very outspoken and we're not politically correct for sure. But we can serve a very broad base of clients, and not just obviously clients in the United States. Although our focus is primarily on moving assets of Westerners to the global South, to the BRICS plus countries, to safe havens in the Caribbean that want to be part of the developing world. I mean, Dominica. Let's talk about Dominica for a second,
Sure.
Because Dominica is a country where it's in the Caribbean. What you have with a lot of these countries that are a part of the CARICOM is they are offering citizenship by investment, which goes into their national development fund. It helps build the country up. It helps provide some basic services to the population. And these places are becoming banking havens. And where do you see the president of Dominica going? And most recently to China. Why is that? Well, because a lot of Chinese are seeing that coming to the United States as investors is really getting tricky for them. They may get denied a visa, depending on if they've got a relative somewhere or in the party. Who knows? But they're starting to see the Caribbean and even some places in LATAM as more advantageous to come into, to get access to the U.S. market from the South rather than try to come into it directly. And I've talked to our attorney in Mexico City about this, and he's very bullish on the BRICS investment in Mexico for similar reasons, because you've got all these tariffs, you've got all these attempts to build a fortress America, or not really even a fortress America, a fortress globalist American empire with the remaining vassals, and squeeze the vassals harder. And it's not going to work. It's not working, folks. It isn't working economically, because all the US, all Washington and London are really doing increasingly is isolating themselves. And all these countries, even some countries that are very staunch members of NATO, are looking at the exits and are starting to wonder, this isn't working. Where's the president of Poland, for example, this week? Well, guess what? He's in China.
Right.
What's up with that? Okay.
This is what a lot of Americans don't realize, man. It's like Americans think that their country is like the city on the hill. That's all Hollywood bullshit. Okay? It's Hollywood bullshit. I'll tell you why. The United States of America makes nothing. It produces nothing. The biggest exports for the United States of America is trash and recyclables. That's our biggest export. All right. So you need to look at it. There's a reason why, like I said, the G7 is the insolvent seven. You're talking about insolvent economies that are broken bankrupt, that are based in deindustrialized countries. Okay. There is nothing. I mean, people don't understand. When you start understanding and you start studying physical economies and physical economies scale, you begin to grasp in your head how far behind the curve the United States is and the Western world is compared to the physical economies that are out there in the BRICS, in the global South, that are emerging and that are surpassing us. So if you want to get business done, I the perfect example of this. I had a colleague of mine that's in like Shenzhen, right? He once told me this: look, if I want to launch a smartphone, right, I can do a CAD design, submit it at 9 a.m. and by like 4:30 p.m. before end of day, I'll have a working model on my desk. That is the type of supply chain efficiency the United States could only salivate about.
Yeah, it's not about cheap labor, folks. It's not just about so-called cheap labor. An engineer in Shenzhen can make almost as much and certainly keep a hell of a lot more of his income in Shenzhen than he could in Silicon Valley, paying those California income taxes and those ridiculous California rents.
Yeah, exactly correct. So when you look at that, when you look at the fact that anything that you want to get done in the bleeding edge technology, folks, and most people's ideas, and this is because of Western media, most people's ideas of China is like rice paddies and sweatshops. And let me explain something to you guys. There's a wonderful YouTube channel called Walk East. Go look at it. Walk East. And that is going through some of the major cities that are in China. Let me explain something to you. the 17th biggest city in China is bigger than New York City. Okay, the 17th biggest.
Yeah.
And when you start seeing the infrastructure, the technology, and how people are living, this idea of communist China where, you're thinking rice paddies and sweatshops and everything is in some sort of a gray filter, so it looks really dreary over there, and Western media has been caught doing that, you start realizing you've been lied to. You're not the largest economy in the world. You're not the most powerful military in the world. In fact, you're a joke. You're a pathetic laughingstock. You're an insolvent, broke, decrepit nation that is hooked on global homo, and the rest of the world's moving on without you. The question is this. The largest transfer of wealth in human history is about to take place. Do you want to get paid? That is the only question you need to be concerning yourself with. All right? Not, I was born in this land, my grandpappy owned this land, and I'm going to fight to the death. Well, have at it. Maybe that's you. Maybe you want to do that. But you want to know something? I like to live. I like options. And let me explain something to you. You're not going to fight a decrepit government. You cannot fight and win against this type of government unless they themselves collapse, unless some good people come in and take it. But you want to know something? People are so far gone that you really want to hedge your livelihood on that hope, or would you rather have a strategy?
And how many years of your life do you want to spend fighting?
Exactly.
how many years? And even if you were willing to do that, make that sacrifice, do you have the right to make that sacrifice for your children and grandchildren?
War is for ideologues, man. War is for ideologues and morons.
Yeah.
The wealthy are smart. They get out of the way and they profit from it. Chaos and an opportunity is the same word in China. It's the same word. Crisis and opportunity is the same word.
It certainly is the latter. And I'm a fan of there's a Chinese series that came out in 2010. It's called Three Kingdoms, or The War of the Three Kingdoms. And I'm a fan. There's a scene in that movie or that mini series, and there's 95 episodes in it, and I've watched all 95. But it took me like
which streaming service is this?
It's on YouTube. You can find it for free on YouTube. Just type in Three Kingdoms 2010, and you'll find it. And there's a very famous scene in that series where Cao Cao, the Chinese warlord, who's kind of like the Chinese Machiavelli, centuries before Machiavelli, Italy. Yeah, right. This is like early 2nd century AD China. Okay, with the Roman Empire was going and everything going through its own crises that was about to start, and China is going through civil war. And Cao Cao says to Liu Bei, who's sort of like this more traditional Confucian guy, he's more trad, he's more conservative. He says to him, it's too late to restore order. In my opinion, we cannot restore the empire, the great Han Empire as it was. All we can do now is create a new order. And we create that new order by recruiting talented men. And once talented men see other talents flocking to a particular banner, then they join. And then through talent, you get strategy. And with superior strategy, you attract more talent and you achieve victories.
Right.
So, and this is what we're saying to people. This is what we're saying to people. The U.S. is going through, chaos. It's going through trouble. A lot of it's deliberate. A lot of it's being generated behind the scenes. There is a plan to take down this country from inside. I don't have to go into all the details about who and why. Everybody who's watched alt media for years and years and years, and not just viewed it as entertainment, understands this. So the question is, what do you want to do? And even from the Christian perspective, some people say, well, what about turning the other cheek and loving your enemy? Well, that command of Christ was to people as individuals, to people as his followers, to be exemplary. But they didn't have the right to turn the other cheek and watch the innocents that depended on them get butchered. That's different. That's something completely different, right? You could turn the other cheek personally as a Christian, but do you have the right to let the government take your child from you if you don't agree to, puberty blockers as a Christian?
Right.
Right? I would argue no. You have an obligation to get your kid the hell out of this country, if at all possible, even if they're going to try to throw you in jail to do it. That's my personal opinion on that. So, let's just dispense with all of that and just focus on what is to be done, folks. What is to be done? And that's why we created this company. That's why we've had a steady number of people contacting us saying, I've got these assets, I've got this. We're getting referral momentum now. There's still a lot of things we're going to be doing. We're not even really doing a lot of email marketing yet. I mean, folks, we're running shows. We have the social channels, the main social channels on Telegram and X. We're not really, we're not on Facebook. We're not on Instagram. They don't like crypto on Instagram. We're not on a lot of platforms yet. But I got to tell you, folks, people are already approaching us. Word of mouth is strong. Word of mouth
is very strong.
We got referrals.
Absolutely.
We got people, steady stream of people coming. And I like to tell the folks we're talking to, who are already looking to work with us as affiliates, it's a trickle right now, but it's going to become a wide stream, especially after this November election. And, if the U.S. continues on its present path in the next several years, it's going to be a mighty river of talent flowing to the south.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the other question: like, what happens if Trump loses? What happens if they steal it from him again?
Or they just throw him in jail? Let's say, quote unquote, he wins, but then they just throw him in jail anyway.
Exactly.
Imagine that plot twist.
Imagine that plot twist, right? I mean, let's be honest here. Did they fix anything, Charles, from the 2020 election? Did they fix anything in terms of the discrepancy, the problems that led to the discrepancies, the problems that led to the obfuscation of what was actually happening? Did they fix any of that? I don't think
nothing's
they did.
Been fixed, in my opinion. I mean, there are going to be more poll watchers. Maybe there's going to be some states that have passed.
Well, what's a poll watcher going to do?
With the mail-in ballots in the key swing states, nothing has.
Exactly, and that's how you know things are still kind of screwed up and something stinks in Denmark, right? That's number one. Number two, it's like what's a poll watcher going to do when you've been kicked out of the room and they put pizza boxes up on the windows and you can't see through those pizza boxes? Then what?
It happened in Michigan.
Oh, there's going to be lead will fly. Ain't shit going to happen. I remember reading back in the early aughts this Russian author. I forget his name, but he
Dmitry Orlov.
I think it was Orlov. Yes, it was Orlov who said the American will go to his. It will go.
No, I'm sorry. This is Igor Panarin. Excuse me. This is Professor Igor Panarin that you're quoting right
Yes, that's who it was. Right.
So
he said the American will go. Yeah, the American will go into slavery, beating his chest, screaming about how free he is, and the rest of the world will look and snicker.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a different Stanislav, not our friend Stanislav Karpidnik. It was a third Russian. Sorry, I keep thinking it's either Orlov or Panarin, but it was actually a guy who had a blog named Stanislav who kind of just, that's it. Like, he had what he wanted to say. He said that, and it went viral. I think Glenn Beck read it on his show. This was around 2009, 2010. Obama had just come in. All the Obamonomics was starting. That you had cash for clunkers and Obamacare, and all this stuff was being rolled out. And by the way, I was not having a very good time economically in my personal financial life at that time. I mean, it was pretty bad for me. I mean, I'd worked at a major Wall Street firm. Things were not great, at that time. And I remember reading all this stuff, and I ended up going abroad, going to a very large country in Eurasia, because I really could not find work in a suitable field here in this country. I mean, more than, minimum wage stuff. And it was a pretty rough time in my life, but I learned a lot from it too. I mean, a lot of things that happened, because I realized that what people need to succeed, they need systems. They don't just need ideas, and they don't just need the willingness to work hard. A lot of your parents told you, hey, work hard, work your 9 to 5, get the college degree, get the good job, buy your house, be frugal, and live happy ever after. And obviously that advice does not work in a highly inflationary environment. And, Robert Kiyosaki, who started buying houses right after he came back from Vietnam in the 70s, when the inflation was just, taking off, the stagflationary era, he's ridiculed. He said, savers are losers. If you're taking Dave Ramsey's advice, the government's already ripping you off way more than what you think. The official inflation statistics are lies. You all know that we're in 20, 30, 40% inflation, depending on which part of the country you're in each year. We're not in, a single digit inflationary environment anymore. And, that's funny because the people from LATAM, the people who've seen inflation, who've seen kleptocratic failing states, they get it. The people from the former Soviet Union who are more street smart, who've seen a superpower collapse, they get it. A lot of, mainline white bread Americans, conservative or liberal, they don't get it, V. They really don't.
No, they don't. Because they're under the delusion, James. They're under the delusion that America is perpetually forever. That somehow it's exempt. Somehow it's exempt from history. Somehow it's exempt from any of the bad things that could happen. And it's not, because they think that America is chosen by God. This is all brainwashing by the Hollywood morons, by even religious evangelical leaders. Yeah, just using bad hermeneutics and bad exegesis. I've never seen a country that's been theologically and historically and sociologically completely brainwashed. Yes, in such a grand design. I mean, historians after the United States collapses, historians are going to be picking apart the rudiments and the things and the nuances of what occurred, what caused this, societally speaking, where people just are completely absolved. They have no impetus in getting involved. They have no impetus in really getting their hands dirty. They're looking always to someone else, a leader, a figurehead, somebody to lead them out like a bunch of sheep. And that is problematic, man. The American experience has been a very soft experience. It's not like the Russians, who suffered through World War I, suffered through World War II, suffered through communism, suffered through a lot of things. It's a different experience. A hardened people, a tougher people, they have that social and societal discernment and wherewithal and real grit to endure. The American, on the other hand, is so far removed from that real grit that the only connection the American has is Hollywood movies, which doesn't. It's crazy to me, man. It's crazy to me.
And that Hollywood bubble also creates this unreality that it's never going to touch me. We're invincible. Right. We can fire ATACMS missiles at a crowded beach in Sevastopol and Crimea and kill and wound kids. And somehow that's never going to blow back on the U.S. anywhere other part of the world, much less in Ukraine. I mean, it's really bizarre, and the level of delusion that people have. I was watching a video by a guy, I forgot his name, Ryan something, a YouTuber who probably did 4 years in the Army, and then he got out and became an IT guy in suburban Maryland. And he's sitting there and he's trying to answer questions from his audience, his YouTube audience, about, is America ready for war with Russia? Is America ready for war with China? And he's saying, well, I talked to all these guys in elite units, and I've been around Green Berets and 82nd Airborne, all these blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you are so detached, incredibly detached from reality. And I doubt, because we've just passed the anniversary of the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, and the Soviet counterattack and Operation Bagration in 1944, where it was the most crushing defeat that the German army, or probably any European army, has suffered in a single battle in centuries of European or world military history. It was a masterpiece of a ground war campaign and a deception campaign before it. But the main point I'm making is that these people have never so much as cracked a book about the Great Patriotic War, World War II, and the suffering that the Russian people were willing to endure to win that war. Because I just tell people, my favorite military philosopher isn't Sun Tzu or Clausewitz. My favorite military philosopher is Mike Tyson. You know what Mike Tyson is famous for saying? Everybody's got a plan.
Everybody has a plan.
Right?
Exactly.
These people all have their plans and how awesome. And, these Wunderwaffen are going to win the war. You know who also thought Wunderwaffen was going to win the war for them? And if they just killed enough Russians, they could win the war? Nazi Germany. That's who the last power that thought if they just killed enough Russians and they had all these Wunderwaffen coming out, they could still somehow win. Yeah, think about that, folks.
Exactly.
And how they ended up.
And here's the other thing here, right? The Russians are masters of combined arms warfare at a level that the United States could only dream about, number one. Number two, the U.S. never won a war, period.
Not since 1945, we haven't.
Yeah, and we didn't even win World War II. Let's be honest, it was the Russians. We won the Pacific Theater against a broken...
The Japanese. That's it.
Which is a big freaking deal. The Japanese were already... with their supply chains stretched thin, the lack of fuel, the lack of armament, they were going to lose that war to begin with, right?
Yeah, they were losing the guerrilla war to the Chinese already on the ground.
Exactly correct. So the Japanese, the winning the Pacific Theater, right, which we think it's, again, Hollywood brainwashing here, right? Hollywood brainwashing, which again is we think it's some sort of great thing. Oh, we won World War II. No, we didn't. Okay, 8 out of 10, folks. 8 out of 10 German soldiers died at the hands of Russians. 8 out of 10.
Yep.
I mean, America claiming victory in World War II is the equivalent of a Super Bowl game where the opposition team is getting smoked 40-0, or
and the backup
40
quarterback
to
comes
7.
in and doesn't turn the ball over. And
exactly.
The backup quarterback's MVP, right?
yeah, exactly. The backup quarterback comes in, and with 5 seconds on the clock, he takes a knee.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to. Let me be clear, okay, for the World War, anybody who's a son of a World War II veteran, we're not denigrating anybody's sacrifice or service. I mean, a lot of people suffered. There were big battles, Normandy, D-Day, but let's just be very clear. There would have been no D-Day. There would have been no Battle of the Bulge. There would have been no anything, no Band of Brothers, anything you've seen in all the Hollywood films and miniseries, without the Battle of Moscow, the Battle of Stalingrad, and the Battle of Kursk, period.
Correct.
Would not have happened. And even you could make an argument that Japan, the Pacific War probably would have dragged on an extra year because the Japanese were ready to fight to the death before the Soviets basically curb stomped them in Manchuria, encircled, routed a 1 million-man army in the span of a few weeks in August of 1945, which coincidentally, seemed to create a certain urgency to drop the atomic bombs in Japan. Just saying. So, look, I've had this discussion with Michael Yon, who's in Japan now, and really is he's really fascinated. He loves Japanese culture, loves their food. He's got a friend who's a young Japanese journalist, Masako, and we were talking about this very topic, where I said to him, do people think it's a coincidence that all these attacks on the shipping in the Red Sea lane, which used to be one of the most vital sea lanes of the British Empire, it was a vital lane in both world wars, and all these attacks by the Houthis on City of London insured shipping, because Lloyd's of London and the City of London insure the vast majority of those merchant ships out there, keeps increasing. It keeps increasing in sophistication and frequency and over the horizon targeting. We're talking about a sea drone that's hitting a ship that is way outside of visual range. There's nobody on shore with a pair of binoculars guiding it to the target. I'm not satellite guidance here. Do people think that is happening?
Well, the flat earthers will challenge you on that one, James.
Well, I'm just saying, do people think all this Houthi attacks intensifying, or what's about to happen with Israel and Hezbollah, that rumble is getting worse and worse for Israel. Do people think that all this happening is totally coincidental and has nothing to do with the Ukrainian theater? No, wake up, folks. It's not coincidental, okay? There are going to be consequences. There is going to be payback. Just because it doesn't happen today or tomorrow or next week doesn't mean that there isn't going to be hell to pay down the road for all this stuff that people are doing, and all this BS, and the fact that those ATACMs, those HIMARS, those Patriot batteries, especially the ones that have been destroyed, they're operated by Americans, folks. They're not operated by Ukrainians. Let's be clear.
Correct.
Okay, and nobody's fooled. Putin said it. Everybody in Russia knows who's operating all these systems. And when one of them kills a bunch of kids, whether it was intentional or not, doesn't really matter. You're firing a cluster. Scott Ritter made this point. You're firing a cluster missile into a city with beachgoers, full well is packed with tourists. That's a war crime, folks.
It is a war crime. And the cluster munition is banned in the Geneva Conventions. It's banned
by 100 countries. Not in the Geneva Conventions, but it's banned.
Right.
100 countries have signed the treaty banning the cluster munitions precisely because they leave behind these bomblets. And, they end up being like landmines. People step on them. Farmers are tilling the fields, and they get blown up on them. And people are still dying from, landmines and Agent Orange and all the crap that was left behind in Southeast Asia and Vietnam.
Oh, you mean by the exceptional country, that's the biggest impediment to world peace in the history of the world? You mean that country who's been leaving bomblets and chemical agents and this, that, and the other all over the place?
And depleted uranium in Iraq and Serbia, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean that country, the exceptional one, the city on the hill.
Yeah.
Look, I'm gonna tell you right now, folks. America's way overdue for an ass kicking. And all these schlep rocks who I'm a former 82nd Airborne. I'm a Green Beret. I'm a Baby SEAL. I'm a Delta. These guys got chewed up by goat herders in Afghanistan. If you read the memoirs of SEAL Team 6 and 3 and SEAL Team 2, you read the Green Beret guys. They were marveled at how ferocious the Taliban was. They marveled that these guys were moving in quick. They hit us hard. Look, the baby SEALs had a little taste of the Houthis. Do you remember this, James? Do you remember this back in 2016 when the first day of Trump being in office, he wakes up and he finds out that 3 SEALs were killed in Yemen?
I remember that raid. Yeah, a little bit about it.
Right. And then the Americans were all sitting there. How did they know? How did they know we were coming? We hit them at a pre-dawn raid. How did that happen? They got a little taste. Why do you think the most vaunted Navy in the world, quote unquote, is literally pulling its aircraft carriers out of the Red Sea? How come they're not going after? And how come the mouse that roared, which is the UK, right? How come they're not going after the Houthis? How come the Marines are not on the ground facing the Houthis? Because they knew what was going to happen. Facing the Houthis is going to be like facing Hezbollah. You're going to talk about a vaunted military force, a vaunted guerrilla force that's going to chew you out.
Yeah.
And give you a body count that will make you shit your pants. That's what's going to happen.
It's really, I mean, folks, it's again, war is not just about how much punishment you think you can dish out and how badass you think you are. It's also about how much pain you as a military, your logistics, and your society is willing to absorb, especially in a peer-to-peer conflict. Let me say that again. War is not just about how much punishment you can dish out, but how much pain your society is willing to absorb. And I don't see a lot of people, regardless of whether they've got a blue and yellow flag, a Ukrainian flag out front of their business or their car, whatever. I don't see the stomach. I don't see the appetite when Ukraine runs out of Ukrainian men, and they're already running out of them, for NATO, whatever. Who is NATO anyway? For American, Canadian, British, Polish troops to go in there and fight and die alongside the Ukrainians. And that's really why you're seeing all this escalation now, because Ukraine is running out of manpower and they know it. So that's why they're trying to goad Putin into doing something that they think will somehow bring NATO into the war to rescue them, because they've internalized their own propaganda, or they believe their own BS, or they just realize this is their only shot. And if they don't do that, then, Zelensky might as well pack up the suitcases, the 20 suitcases, and hop on the private jet and go to his mansion in Miami Beach. Exactly
correct, man. Exactly correct. And here's the other thing, when you look at it this way, Zelensky's going to get deposed. They're going to get rid of him, right? He cannot stand in power much longer. And the idiots in D.C. are running out of options. And a lot of morons who are uneducated idiots, which you have a plethora of in the United States and much of the Western world. You're talking about, folks, let me explain something to you. Our countries are run by the bottom of the barrel. They're run by midwits and halfwits, right? Midwits and halfwits.
They're run by people who are credentialed but not educated. They're credentialed but not educated. Yeah.
Exactly. Credentialed. And they're smart enough to pass a test, but that's about it. Right? They have no real life experience. They're deluded. They all are echo chambers. They're all a bunch of circle jerkers. They sit around and jerk each other off on their stupid, grandiose plans. It's all bullshit, right? It's all fake. And let me explain something to you, right? These guys, these midwits who think that we can somehow have some sort of nuclear response, it's idiotic. Because I remember one of my clients who was in charge, who was part of, during the Cold War, the nuclear triad in the United States, which is ICBMs, bombers, and the naval, the submarines, right? That was the nuclear triad. And then he went on to, play a very vital role in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. And one of the things that he told me before he retired was he doubts that if even 20% of our nukes even function. Okay. And look, The Minuteman III, which is the latest nuclear missile we have, was built in 1973, man. Okay? It's a joke. It is nothing compared to Russian hypersonic Sarmats and their hypersonic nuclear-tipped missiles that we have no defense against. And Zircons and Kinzels. Exactly. We have nothing against that. We have nothing that could stop that. Okay, the Russians are about 2.5 generations, maybe even 3 generations ahead of us in terms of hypersonics. It's a game changer, you know. So, you know, and this is the thing here, folks. Is you know, there's Hollywood and then there's real life. In real life, it's not about how bad the United States will lose, because the United States will lose very badly in a war against Russia or even China. It's how quickly they will lose. Yeah. And most experts who actually look at this, we'd probably last about 2.5 weeks.
And the side that will turn to tactical nuclear warheads in desperation would almost certainly be the United States of America, not the Russians or Chinese to use them first. And this is the thing that people don't understand and don't want to understand. But I'll just conclude by saying, following up on what you said about the gentleman who was, you know, very familiar, very intimate with the nuclear triad, with the ICBMs, you know, during the Cold War years. My grandfather, on maternal side, was a SAC officer. He was in Strategic Air Command. He flew B-47 bombers in the early 60s, height of the Cold War. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was based at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. So front line if the conflict, you know, went hot. And, you know, he told my mother, he said, you know, never forget that the Russians love their country too. And this was 1962, you know, he said this. And the type of military officer we had and the competency levels and the qualifications they had and the understanding the realities of war, because they talked to the World War II vets, they talked to the Korea vets, and a lot of them had been in Vietnam. They'd seen at least a highly scaled proxy war. We lost 10,000 aircraft in Vietnam, folks. 10,000 helicopters and planes in the Vietnam War. People don't realize that. We didn't just lose 59,000 Americans, and really more than that. That's just the ones that were official casualties. It was probably closer to 70 or 80 if you count all the contractors. Like, we lost 10,000 aircrafts, overwhelmingly to who? To Soviet designed, Soviet shipped, and in the few cases, Soviet advised surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft guns, but mainly just AA guns. I mean, so people think about that. I mean, in terms of just not the pain and punishment that can be dished out in a peer, and that was a near peer war. That wasn't a true peer war. That was a near peer conflict. So I'm just trying to get people to deal with the reality and focus on their plan.
James, I have to run. I have a hard stop coming up, but I want to thank all you guys for checking this out. And look, ExitStrategy.World. Thank you all.
All right. Goodbye now.
Cheers.